James Barnes, happy Sunday. Let me tell you something. Knowledge of the Holy One is, and the word is understanding, is understanding. It's like a concrete is. To know who the Holy One is understanding. We find that in Proverbs, I was going to remember it, but it's 9:10, and I'm going to read that to you here. We'll start here, then I'm going to work my way backwards a little bit, like I always like to do, and then it's true though, and and here's what we have to know Him. Right, not easy. Okay, it says here, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. And, in my faith journey, it was a season where I was like digging in, looking and seeking God. Like God says, seek and you will find. And so I was seeking, and there was a very pivotal moment. I know it was it was October 6th. I remember the day specifically. And, I don't need to get into details, but I know that, and looking back on it, I call it my pinprick moment. And because there was desire to know the Holy One, and then there was the Holy One. So to have even just the smallest knowledge of the Holy One, but it means to have knowledge of the Holy One. So I remember that day very clearly, sitting, like I said, into my bed, reading my Bible, and I did have that revelation of the Holy One, and that was a change in everything, because before then it was hope and knowledge of the Holy One, and that's different than knowledge of the Holy One, because knowledge of the Holy One brings us out of the cave, as like Isaiah, and you hear that, what are you doing here? You're like, oh, wait a second, what am I doing here? And it brings us out, and it doesn't matter how big or small that knowledge is, as Christ Stephen Spock talks about the yeast that grows within us. You start with just a small knowledge is all you need. You don't need to be, just because God introduces himself to you doesn't mean you need to know everything. You need to know him. And that's like the bigger picture I want to bring in here, is knowledge of the Holy One is a solution for all of our problems. Not because he's going to come in and solve our problems, not because he's going to come in and stop the other 8 billion people in this world from annoying us, or stopping in traffic, or maybe taking our job, or doing even worse things to us. But at the end of the day, because of that chaos in the world, and we know that we're promised that chaos will be in the world. We're promised that if there's 2 people in the room, there's going to be differences, and it's a given. But there's 8 billion plus in the world, so we're given that. So, but Proverbs tells us knowledge of the Holy One is the beginning of wisdom, which should give us a little sense of peace in this whole chaos. You know what I mean? What do you do? But it says, I'll read it again. It says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And so the moment I knew who God was, and I didn't know, like, hello, nice to meet you, doesn't mean you know everything about a person, the attributes and things. So that was the moment that I decided, here's the day that I'm going one direction, and I'm going to know everything about God that I can possibly know, because I did have that epiphany of the Holy One, and versus the before that day, I didn't know where to go. It was no direction. I call it a pinprick moment. Imagine almost like a big old white wall, and all you just had is a little teeny prick of knowledge of him, but that's all you need. You don't need more than that. It's like at birth, you're born, and you're there, but it's really on your parents to kind of make sure you get along. And so as you're reborn and born into God's kingdom under his authority, it all begins different. And you might not know the rules at first, and it takes time to learn those. And that's why the Bible is very, very, very critical. And so let me do this though. I want I always like to say, okay, see, this is one thing, but how do you turn it into something practical? As a man, I can tell you this, and I know I'm women too, but as a man, there are limits to who you can call. There are endpoints to where there's no other resources. The resources you could call your pastor, but he's not going to give you, he's not going to do the things for you that you need to do. You can call every human in the world, and you're going to come to an end of something. And at that point, who do you call? I mean, hopefully you have called him beforehand, but he will be there. At the deepest parts of the sea, he will be there. The highest points in the space you can go, you could call on the Lord, he will be there. There's no point to desperation. So it's like we always are looking for somebody to come in and save us, and he has done so. But he will be there. In your hardest, most deepest moments. I remember seeing a little video of a man that was on death row, and he said once he came to know Christ within that space didn't become a prison. It became a sanctuary. And so we see that, and it's because knowledge of him changes everything. And so if you find yourself at the end of the rope, and your brain can only perceive the problems, but you don't see any solutions, then he is there to call on. And so let's move into the New Testament. This is my favorite part. I always like going to the New Testament, and I want to tie it into a New Testament story that I think it's fascinating. And this one's a little longer. It's not longer. It's in John 43 for 49, and it's that story about Nathaniel, and so here, let me just read it, and then we'll jump back in and I'll make commentary a little bit. But the next day, Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. Finding Philip, he said to him, "Follow me." Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was from the town of Bethesda. Philip found Nathanael and told him, "We have found the one Moses wrote about in the law, and about whom the prophets have wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." Nazareth? And I was like, Nazareth, exclamation point. Can anything good come from there? He's like, whatever. And Nathanael asked, "Come and see," said Philip, So, all right, fine, I'll go. When Jesus saw Nathanael approaching, he said to him, "Here truly is an Israelite, who there is no deceit." "How do you know me?" Nathanael asked. Jesus answered, "I saw you while you were still under the fig tree, before Philip called you." Nathanael declared, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Boom, pause. What just happened there is what I'm talking about. He was not expecting for that the knowledge and the wisdom that the God to literally declare, "I know you, I've seen you in your studies, I've seen you in your private times, I know where you spend your time." And so it's almost like the reverse, where we are seeking out God can come and touch us. And that day when I had my pinprick moment was very similar to this. It was like it didn't take but that. It's like I went from not truly having knowledge of God to having knowledge of God. And so, go back and find out where to seek, knock, and he will open the door. But I'm going to tell you that the beginning of knowledge is hold on, let me read that reverse. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. And so we put this packages up and close it off for you, is that we will find ourselves at the end of the rope. Like I just mentioned, we will find ourselves without anywhere else to go. You can ask your wife or anybody else, but you need to call on the Lord, because he will deliver us through those times. He says he will, and he does. And it's strange, because I've seen his delivery. I've called to him before I knew him, and I knew hindsight, I could see he was there. He had delivered so many times in so many ways when I was disobedient and didn't even know him. And so to have that knowledge now and to know him is to call on him when I don't have anywhere else to go, but also to call on him when I sit at my dinner table, call on him when I drink my coffee, call on him when I call a friend, call on him often because he is there. He's there. And I'll just leave it at that in Jesus' name.